The Sicilian Slave War, also known as the First Servile War, was one of ancient Rome's most significant slave uprisings. This conflict was not only significant for its sheer size and impact, but also for the fact that it laid bare the social tension and brutality associated with the Roman slave system. A rich and strategic island in the Mediterranean, Sicily became a Roman province after the Punic Wars against Carthage. It was a major agricultural source, especially of wheat, feeding Rome's growing population. To sustain this productivity, the Romans relied heavily on slave labor. These slaves were often war prisoners, but many were also captured during pirate raids or sold by slave traders. The living conditions of Sicilian slaves were incredibly severe. Many labored on latifundia, large rural estates, subjected to exhausting working hours, meager food, and brutal treatment by masters and foremen. The sulfur mines, common on the island, were even worse, with many slaves perishing from exhaustion and disease. The widening gap between the wealthy landowners and the poor, including slaves and free peasants, resulted in social tension. Slaves were considered property with virtually no rights, which led to deep resentment. The plantation system in Sicily killed thousands of slaves every year, as they were forced to toil exhaustively in the fields from dawn till dusk, shackled to their ankles, and trapped in suffocating underground pits at night. To get food, many slaves turned to banditry to survive. However, the Roman Senate took no action to stem this alarming trend, turning one of the Republic's most beautiful and fertile provinces into a dreadful stronghold of misery, crime, atrocities, and death. A man called Eunus was a pivotal and charismatic figure in the First Servile War, being one of the most high-profile leaders of the Slave Revolt in Sicily. His story is captivating, as he epitomizes both the brutality of slavery and the deep yearning for freedom. Eunus was born in Syria and brought to Sicily as a slave. His Eastern roots contributed to his mystical aura, as he claimed to have prophetic and magical powers. Eunus was notorious for pulling off little magic tricks, such as breathing fire out of his mouth, boosting his reputation as someone in touch with the divine. His talent for impressing the masses and inspiring hope in the helpless slaves made him a natural leadership character. Eunus was already popular with the slaves before the uprising for his alleged visions and prophecies. He foretold the liberation of the slaves and the downfall of their oppressors, and these predictions stirred up the spirits of those living under harsh oppression. Once a group of slaves, desperate for liberation, came to him for advice, Eunus seized the opportunity to deliver on his prophetic promises. Leading nearly 400 slaves, Eunus launched an attack on the city of Enna, the starting point for a large-scale revolt. After capturing it, he appointed himself king, adopting the name Antiochus, a reference to the Seleucid dynasty of Syria, where he came from. This royal title also epitomized his ambition to forge an independent slave kingdom in Sicily. Eunus revealed remarkable strategic skills during the insurrection, uniting the slaves under his leadership and greatly expanding the movement. His army rapidly grew to tens of thousands of fighters. He succeeded in controlling several important cities in Sicily, threatening Roman rule on the island for years to come. Cleon, a slave of Greek origin who headed a rebel force in western Sicily, was another important uprising figure. Led by Eunus and Cleon, the slaves conquered several towns and forts, posing a real threat to Roman control of the island. Initially, they underestimated the revolt, dispatching insufficient forces to stifle it. The Roman legions endured several humiliating defeats at the hands of the slaves, who used guerrilla tactics and knew their way around the hilly Sicilian terrain. With time, however, Rome mobilized larger and more orderly armies. The Roman commander Publius Rupilius was tasked with stopping the revolt. He led a brutal campaign, besieging the rebel-controlled cities and laying down a blockade. Famine and desertion started to weaken the slaves' forces. Enna, the rebel stronghold, fell under siege and was eventually captured by the Romans. Cleon died in battle, and Eunus was captured while trying to escape. He was taken to a Roman prison, where he soon died, probably of disease or starvation. The rebellion was finally crushed in 132 BC, after years of war. To retaliate, the Romans crucified thousands of captured slaves and strengthened their control over Sicily to prevent future uprisings. The First Servile War was the beginning of several major slave of revolts that shook the Roman Republic. While it failed to free the slaves or change the serf system, the revolt emphasized the weakness of the regime and the constant threat of large-scale uprisings. More revolts would follow decades later, including the Second Servile War between 104 and 100 BC and the famous Spartacus Revolt between 73 and 71 BC. The Slave Revolt in Sicily made an enduring mark on Roman history, reminding the Romans of the necessity to tightly control the vast slave population on which their economy and society were based.